Hi, it's me Tox, and as the title of this video goes, today I'll be discussing how far can each Akatsuki member push Madara in a fight. For this video, I'll be using Valley of the End version of Madara, the one who fought Hashirama. I'll be setting the match conditions to make things more interesting, so for example the distance or knowledge might be rigged in the Akatsuki member's favor, as otherwise for few Akatsuki members this would just be way too short. So let's dive in and see which or if any Akatsuki member can push him to use anywhere near full power. HIDAN has quite literally no win condition whatsoever. No matter how much time I spent thinking about how I could rig the conditions in his favor, I really could not come up with anything. Unless he has a sample of Madara's blood before the fight even starts, or he's fighting Madara with, I don't know, his limbs amputated, he's just never pushing Madara to more than just basic hands-to-hands combat. Upon being revived by Rin Tensei, Madara, without any eyes, instantly overwhelmed Sage Mode Naruto with his speed. After he absorbs Hashirama's Sage Chakra and enters Sage Mode, he proceeds to dodge EMS Sasuke sword combos. Hashirama at this point still thinks that Madara is only in the process of regaining his past strength. We know Madara, after being revived by Rin Tensei, is stronger than his Edo Tensei version, seeing how he effortlessly counters the gates that were too much for his Edo Tensei version to handle. And also the fact that Edo Tensei, no matter how perfect, still summons characters a bit weaker than they were while alive. Now, obviously I'll admit that Madara had some upgrades done to his Edo Tensei that no other, character had. But none of those were implied or shown to have made up for his lost stats from his Edo Tensei debuff to any degree. Like, there was just no mention of Hashiboop, somehow boosting his speed or whatever. So overall, living Madara should still be the fastest version of Madara that Hashirama has seen, and Rin Tensei Madara is still, according to Hashirama, only approaching those levels. What this means is that Valley of the End Madara should be able to blitz and overwhelm HIDAN with just hands-to-hands combat, even without needing his Sharingan, which he didn't have when he, effortlessly took care of Naruto. So there is really just no universe where HIDAN lands an attack on Madara. There are also some blood. I mean, even if we assume that HIDAN somehow gets the blood, the idea of Madara just staring at him and letting him finish the ritual is asinine. So Madara can honestly beat HIDAN blind with just his hands alone. As for how does Madara actually end the fight? Well, he obviously cannot kill HIDAN due to his immortality, so rendering HIDAN unable to continue fighting is the only way. And Madara can do that by stealing HIDAN's weapon and using it to cut HIDAN's head off. Anyways, one way or another, Madara is going to win this, and there's just nothing that HIDAN can do about it. Sasori in a regular scenario would get blitzed for the same reasons as HIDAN. So to make things more interesting, let's assume Sasori has some knowledge. There is a large enough distance between him and Madara for Sasori to have enough time to jump out of Hiruko, which, let's be real, is kinda useless in general. Also, so he gets enough time to summon his 100 puppets, his third Kazekage puppet, and get its Iron Sand ready, since it looks like it actually takes a while to get ready. Also, for it to not be so easy for Madara to just get to Sasori, let's also give Sasori the ability to use his Iron Sand to levitate. Now, we haven't seen him doing that before, but honestly, since his control over the Iron Sand is pretty damn good, I don't see a reason why he shouldn't be able to do what Gaara does with his sand and fly on it. Plus, we've seen a Genin Iron Sand user doing that in Boruto, if that means anything. By the time Madara gets close, he'll be getting attacked by the 100 puppets and Iron Sand projectiles, having to make sure he doesn't even get one single scratch on him, as the poison would obviously spell an instant loss for him. Now, Madara can most likely take out all the 100 puppets with just his fire style alone, seeing how he could incinerate his own wood forest with it. And as for Iron Sand scratching Madara, it's very unlikely. From Chiyo at first to then Sakura being able to react to the attacks, it is quite clear that Madara will be able to consistently dodge those. While Sharingan is weaker to attacks from multiple angles, as seen with Killer Bee's Acrobat, that only really matters if the attacks are somewhat fast relative to the person dodging them. If the attacks look like they're barely moving, which, let's be honest, is going to be the case here from Madara's point of view, that weakness of Sharingan no longer really matters. The real issue is taking Sasori out with just fire style techniques. Iron Sand has been hyped as a technique superior to Gold Dust, which also has some decent hype itself. So Madara's Fire Styles destroying Iron Sand is kinda hard sell for those reasons. One could argue that Madara wins with Sharingan Genjutsu, but I know that quite a lot of people believe Sasori might be immune to it, as he doesn't actually have real eyes in the first place. While I don't necessarily agree with that view for various reasons, I will say that if Genjutsu doesn't work, Madara's next option is simply outlasting Sasori. Madara can just dodge around for hours until Sasori tires out and eventually can't control his Iron Sand anymore, at which point he descends to the ground and gets manhandled. If Madara wants to make this fight quicker, he could just use Susanoo to get to Sasori in the air. However, he really doesn't need to do this because he's just safe on the ground as long as he, keeps dodging. He's gonna outlast Sasori and win that way.
それならいいだろう。ただ気を抜くな。死ぬぞ。
For this matchup, we'll be giving KAKUZU full knowledge and enough distance to enter his spider mode or whatever it is. Engaging Madara in hand-to-hand combat would be too risky for KAKUZU, as even in his inferior Edo Tensei version, Madara was physically strong enough to not have his guard broken through by not just Lightning Glow or Traikage, but also base Tsunade. KAKUZU's Doton Domu technique doesn't have good enough feats for me to grant him that he can just take any amount of hits from Madara. Therefore, KAKUZU's best bet is spamming his elemental techniques and combinations at Madara from distance. Now, we did see Kakashi tanking or countering some of them, as well as Ino and Choji dodging them at one point, so the odds of this alone taking out Madara are very low. Madara can just evade and counter the attacks while looking for an opportunity to land his Sharingan Genjutsu. Or possibly, if KAKUZU goes for some crazy combo attack using all 4 or 3 of his masks, Madara might just kill him by firing it back at him with an Uchiha return. Either way, Madara won't be needing more than just his beats to dodge around, and then either Genjutsu or the mentioned Uchiha return for the finisher. And that's about it for his matchup. For Orochimaru, we'll need enough time so he can enter Yamata, so large enough distance gives him that. And he also needs enough knowledge on Madara's Genjutsu skill, so he doesn't just get cocky as per usual and jump to it. Now, Orochimaru has literally no attacks that Madara couldn't just outrun, dodge or counter with his own attacks. The real issue, however, for Madara is downing Orochimaru. Even without Yamata, you need at least the firepower on the level of 4-tailed Naruto's Bijudama, and that's by Orochimaru's own admission. And frankly, Madara's fire style doesn't have the feats to live up to that. Now, Yamata itself has some healing hype on top of Orochimaru's regular stuff, so fire style doing the deed here becomes even more unlikely with that in mind. However, since Orochimaru is in the same boat here when it comes to lacking firepower, this again comes down to just simply Madara outlasting, like in the Sasori matchup. If Madara can fight Hashirama for an entire day, the same guy who has chakra reserves on the level of Biju mode Naruto by the way, and Madara still doesn't get outlasted even by this guy, and that is Madara who is using perfect Susanoo and also controlling Kurama, then Orochimaru is simply never outlasting Madara who's just running around dodging and using some low level ninjutsu. So Madara will just be running around and casting fire style when he needs to, and at some point Madara wins just by doing that, as crazy as it sounds. Now we're giving Deidara full knowledge and large enough distance, so Deidara is allowed to plant his C2 mines, jump on a bird and fly high enough to be able to avoid Madara's ninjutsu casted from the ground. At this point, Madara will already need his 3 Tomoe Sharingan just to avoid stepping on the mines. The C2 missiles which will be fired at him can be countered by Madara either pre-detonating them by firing fire style, or Madara can also use the Gunbai barrier he used to block the rods thrown at him with Biju mode Naruto's avatar. Now some people might suggest that the barrier doesn't really have any feats that would allow it to tank C2 missiles, so just allow me to go on a quick side tangent. KCM2 Naruto has enough strength in his tails to redirect 5 Bijudamas, and even 1 Bijudama is too dense for KCM Naruto to hold onto, and that's the guy who in KCM can resist the biting force of a Biju and even block one's hands with a few chakra arms. So tanking C2 missiles, which only cost Sasuke his cursed seal wing, shouldn't really be an issue here. Now, if these two just keep this up, Deidara will be the first one to lose as he either runs out of clay or chakra. But Deidara is a smart fighter, so he will probably realize this is going nowhere and then C3 or C4 come out. Before that happens, let me make it clear that Deidara is completely safe in the air. Even if Madara ends up sending fire-style techniques at him, Deidara on his bird is quick enough to dodge huge sand structures used by Gaara, and Madara's fire style doesn't travel that fast. It travels at speeds where even Mei can comfortably counter it with her water style, and keep in mind that Mei cannot even cast water style techniques faster than Tsunade can jump several meters ahead of her. So while it's not completely ruled out that Madara could win by sniping Deidara with his fire style, the odds really aren't that high in his favor. Genjutsu also should not work considering the counter methods that Deidara has developed against it, so sooner or later Madara is actually forced to use Susanoo here. Whether he's pressed into using it defensively against C3 or C4, or offensively when he realizes it's the only way he's ever reaching Deidara, he's gonna be pushed into using it eventually regardless. With his lacked Susanoo, he should be able to fight with an aerial opponent, similarly to how Sasuke has done so against Jubi Jinchuriki Obito. Madara should be able to overwhelm Deidara fairly quickly, as Susanoo attack speed is way faster than anything Deidara has ever reacted to before. If C3 comes out before that, then Madara will need to upgrade to V4 Susanoo to survive it. Potentially V3 Susanoo could also tank it, but that's another debate completely. Anyways, at that point, if he is forced to go into V4 Susanoo, it's essentially over for Deidara, as with his first strike, Madara will just win the fight. If C4 comes out before that, well, it's unclear whether C4 would penetrate through Susanoo. So Madara might or might not survive it. We don't really know how these two techniques could interact with each other. But anyways, it would be in Madara's best interests to finish Deidara off with C4 Susanoo the moment he sees Deidara forming his C4. So I could see him pursuing that option as well. In conclusion, Madara is pressed to use Susanoo at the very least, so this makes Deidara the first Akatsuki member who actually can push Madara to Susanoo.
伝説の3人と歌い称されたジライア様なのですからね。
With Kisame, we just need him to start in Water Dome, so enough distance for that, and we also need him to have some knowledge on Sharingan or just Genjutsu in general, so he doesn't lose right off the bat. Once Madara finds himself in Water Dome, Kisame is now fully immune to Genjutsu, as he can just close his eyes and rely on his excellent sensing he has while he's fused with Samehada. Kisame, while fused with Samehada, is quick enough to pressure V2 form B and also outmuscle him, so Madara's chances in hand-to-hand combat are quite low. Using clones and spreading them to swim in various directions so the real Madara can escape sounds good on paper. However, that wouldn't work because Kisame's speed is so high in Water Dome that he can probably just catch up with all the clones before they get anywhere near the edges of the jutsu. So in this situation, Madara can really just rely on his Susanoo. As soon as Kisame gets close enough, Madara has to manifest a Susanoo version that's too dense for Kisame to absorb in one go. Whether that is V2 or V3 Susanoo, or perhaps even V4, eventually Kisame is getting stabbed by a Susanoo sword or crushed by a Susanoo head before he can absorb it. Looking at his absorption pace feats, we can pretty confidently say that Ribcage Susanoo wouldn't be enough, but how high we have to go up the list of the versions of Susanoo, I'm not really sure. In the end, it will take at least some higher version of Susanoo out of Madara, so if I had to pick one, then let's just say V3 Susanoo to stay on the safe side. Now, since we are dealing with Kisame who has full knowledge, he will know that if he gets close to Madara, the Susanoo will end him, like we just covered. So he might actually decide to stay away from Madara, and instead he opts for using Daikodan, the Great Shark Bullet, which could theoretically work. Madara shouldn't know that it absorbs chakra right away, so he might just try tanking it with his lower versions of Susanoo, and he would be surprised when the Susanoo gets absorbed and the Daikodan goes even stronger. So depending on how things go, Kisame could win the fight this way. If things go down any other way though, it's probably just Madara winning it with V3 or V4 Susanoo.
どんな形であれ、己の意志のために戦って死んだ。だからこそ、その意志はつながっている。
We'll have Konan starting in the air and also give her full knowledge to protect her against Genjutsu, but despite all of that, she actually doesn't make it that far at all. Madara's fire style most likely overwhelms her, as she doesn't have movement speed feats or defensive feats to justify surviving against them for very long, and even Tsunade thought they have no chance as Gokage against Madara if they cannot counter his fire style. However, if this is Konan with her Paper Ocean hidden right under Madara's feet, Madara will be forced to pop a Susanoo to survive the onslaught of the explosive attacks. The explosion lasts 10 minutes, so as soon as it stops, he can just destroy Konan from up close the same way Obito did. So the only real hurdle is determining what Susanoo is needed to tank the Paper Ocean. To stay on the safer side, let's say V3, but even weaker versions might do the job. Overall, this is actually a pretty poor matchup for Konan. Although I have her Paper Ocean version quite high on a tier list, she just doesn't perform well here at all, since Madara can just use his Susanoo for 10 minutes straight and nothing will happen to him.
そのシャリンガン、お前はどこまで見えている?
First, let's go over Living Itachi's chances. I don't want to start off with Edo Tensei Itachi, since the result there is kinda obvious. Solo King Solos. Anyways, when it comes to Living Itachi, he is really the first character here that doesn't need any distance adjustments. Itachi's reactions are more than decent, so him getting blitzed or manhandled right out of the gate by Madara is basically out of question. Itachi engaging Madara in taijutsu boats does however expose him to unnecessary risk, as Madara is an expert at clone feints, arguably even more so than Itachi, as his best feat involves tricking 5 Kage at once with his clone. That's why I'm giving Itachi full knowledge here, as it will help him avoid dying to some dumb early clone feint strategy, and also allows him to employ the best strategy he can here, which is critical, as Living Itachi cannot afford to waste any chakra, as his poor health punishes that quite severely. With knowledge, Itachi won't even be wasting any chakra or time on genjutsus, as Madara, who has fully mastered his Sharingan, can break through any of them. This means that Itachi will most likely activate Susanoo right at the start, as it protects him from any offense that 3 Tomoe Madara can muster up. At that point, the win conditions each of them have are as follows. First, Itachi can win either by landing a hit with Totsuka Sword, or second, by landing an Amaterasu shot. Madara, on the other hand, can win either by first outlasting Itachi, or second, by faking death only to use Izanagi to respawn behind Itachi and backstab him. Win condition number 1 is something Madara does not have any specific counter to. It's going to be solely a question of whether you believe Madara can dodge all of Itachi's attempts to stab him with Totsuka. Now here's the thing, Totsuka's best feat is stabbing Edo Tensei Nagato. Madara has shown the ability to react to flicker speeds of the likes of KCM2 Naruto. However, his best movement speed feat remains to be what he did to Sage Mode Naruto. While it's not really clear what are Totsuka's limits when it comes to speed, even without knowing those, it's pretty tough to argue that Madara is just going to be casually and consistently dodging each and every single Totsuka attack. In order to reliably dodge Amaterasu, one needs version 2 for Raikage's flicker speed at least. Now, blitzing Sage Mode Naruto does not get Madara anywhere close to that level of speed. He therefore has to rely on his reaction speed and use that, for example, to block Itachi's line of sight with his fan, which should even be able to possibly absorb Amaterasu if it's used. In the case that it actually lands on Madara himself, he might be able to absorb it, as he has done so previously after he had lost his Rinnegan, indicating that he has some inherent ability to absorb chakra, similarly to character abilities we have seen before, like Yoroi, who fought Sasuke in Chunin exams, or Kisame's ability. Now, some people think it's actually still a Rinnegan ability and Madara can just use it without his eyes. I mean, he used Susanoo without his eyes, so I guess you can make that argument. But anyways, if he has that inherent ability to absorb chakra, then he might even no-sell that. As for Madara's own win conditions, Itachi is likely to assume Madara can and will use Izanagi given his extensive knowledge on it. Because of that, I'm fairly confident a character of Itachi's level of intellect wouldn't fall prey to this strategy, but I left it there because there's still a chance it could happen, as Madara is even capable of programming Izanagi to activate in a delayed fashion, which Itachi might not be aware of, so it could in theory catch Itachi off guard. Now, Madara's other win condition, outlasting Itachi, is a lot more feasible than the Izanagi one. While Itachi's stamina often gets actually underrated in my opinion, and the fact that he essentially took on 2 strong Kage level characters one after the other while using Mangekyo Sharingan techniques the entire time gets frequently glossed over. The fact remains, however, that Madara has obscenely more stamina, and as long as he survives until Itachi can no longer maintain his Susanoo, he wins. Now, Itachi might last a lot longer than he did in the Sasuke fight if he's just using version 1 Susanoo, which is honestly all he needs to protect himself from 3 Tomoe Madara's attacks. But even then, constant Mangekyo Sharingan usage is still going to be incredibly taxing for his body nonetheless. With the win conditions of Itachi that I covered above, which could score a victory for him at any point, I could see Madara pulling this outlasting strategy off around 3 to 6 times out of 10, depending on whether you think he can or cannot absorb Amaterasu. Now, if we make this Edo Tensei Itachi, it does remove all the stamina issues out of the equation, making this matchup that's essentially unwinnable for 3 Tomoe Madara. No matter how long Madara survives, he is not outlasting Itachi here, so his only option is to brute force his way through Itachi's Susanoo, and he can only do so with a Susanoo of his own. We haven't really seen it in action, but given its enormous size, you could argue V4 Susanoo should be enough here. At worst, he's gonna need one sword slash from his perfect Susanoo to wipe Itachi off the map. Though, if we forget about the no limits fallacy for a second, then Itachi reverts it back at Madara and Solo King gets another W. For pain, I could be covering 2 scenarios. One is with 6 paths of pain, the other is with Edo Tensei Nagato. But since the best available strategy for him that I'm going to be using is just as effective for both pain and Nagato himself, I'll cover it just once. The ideal scenario would be enough distance so each path or Nagato himself, depending on which scenario we're going with, can hop into the chameleon summon before Madara can attack. Now, as for whether the chameleon can be seen through by a Sharingan or be sensed, there is, in my opinion, not really a definitive answer. Personally, I'm leaning more towards yes for both of those questions, but for the sake of the discussion, let's explore both. If pain remains untrackable for Madara while inside the chameleon, he can bully Madara around with surprise attacks, from almighty pushes to Asura explosives and lasers to big summons running around and attacking Madara. Madara's not gonna have much of a breathing room here. This makes it so Madara is going to be forced into Susanoo relatively early on. I could see him honestly being forced to go into even V3 Susanoo to really properly handle all the attacks and summons at once. He also doesn't really have a reliable way of getting rid of the Cerberus summon completely, since it just multiplies when being hit, and Madara doesn't have an attack like Amaterasu, which deals damage continuously, which takes care of it. However, Madara could restrain Cerberus' movement by dropping Uchiha Flame formation on him. Now, frankly, we haven't seen Madara using this jutsu, but given the fact that really by far the most likely way Obito learned this jutsu is from Madara himself, I think it's pretty fair to assume Madara can use it as well. With Cerberus out of the picture as it's stuck in the Uchiha Flame formation, that means eventually if Pain or Nagato want to win, they're gonna need either a huge almighty push to get through V3 Susanoo or Planetary Devastation. Regardless of what they choose, Madara can take on these attacks with his V4 Susanoo, and once he's in V4 Susanoo, he doesn't really need to worry about Pain's location, as he can just do a 360 and it's done so. Now, in the case that Chameleon isn't invisible in face of a Sharingan, it just makes it so Madara actually has a chance of taking out Nagato. Madara can just use his elect Susanoo before almighty pushes or planetary devastations that could take him out even come out, though that's really the only thing that changes. Ultimately, V4 Susanoo is what Madara needs here in the worst case scenario.
Nara, ore mo onaji da. Koi.
For Obito, let's go over 2 of his versions, Orange Mask Obito and White Mask Obito. That is Obito, who now also has Rinnegan and 7 Jinchurikis to command. For both of these versions, however, these same things apply. Madara has better speed scaling. While Madara was physically reacting to KCM2 Naruto, Obito was called lacking by the same Naruto before. And that's not all. Madara as an EMS user has his reactions further amped by Choco Tomoe, so he should have reactions at least as good as Sasuke's, as his base is already as good as Sasuke's, and he also has EMS that he has fully mastered. Sasuke, while still getting used to his EMS, was capable of tracking and with his Susanoo even at one point pressuring Jubi Jinchuriki Obito. Sasuke's Susanoo at this point was operating at speeds comparable to even BSM Naruto, so a version of Naruto stronger than the one who called Obito lacking. So Madara's attack speed in his Susanoo should be way beyond what Obito can react to, and it could effectively blitz Obito if Obito turns off his phasing at the wrong moment. Add onto that the fact that Madara can use multiple clones to make the decision making of who to warp with Kamui even trickier for Obito. There's also the fact that even if Obito guesses right and starts warping Madara himself, not the clone, it's arguable that a mid-warp Susanoo manifestation would cancel the warp altogether, as it would push Obito's body back, since when he's warping someone or something else, he is no longer intangible. And you can see why I have my doubts about Obito being able to take out Madara with Kamui. Now, admittedly, Madara doesn't even know what Kamui is, so it would take him some time to figure out that this is the optimal way to play his cards for this fight. So that's why I'm not at all opposed to Obito being lucky few times out of 10 matches and scoring a W here and there with an early Kamui warp before Madara realizes the threat a mere touch from Obito constitutes. However, all the other times, Madara can just make few clones, chase Obito around and either get hit in with Susanoo or eventually outlast Obito. And the way things are, I see it going that way most of the times. However, if we add Bijutsu to the mix and Obito's Rinnegan, things change quite dramatically. Madara, the Giga Chad he is, still can't really hang around Bijutsu without his perfect Susanoo, so he is essentially forced into perfect Susanoo right off the bat, and although he's not losing to Bijutsu whilst in it, he is going to be preoccupied fighting them, and that is all happening while Obito, remember, whose technique Madara isn't aware of, is free to look for a perfect opportunity to use it on Madara. At any moment, at any point in the fight, Madara could just see that Obito has teleported into his Susanoo's crystal where Madara is residing, and he gets his shoulder tapped, and that's all she wrote. Now obviously there's still some ways Madara could prevent this. I mean, just the fact that Obito's chakra signature disappears the moment he warps away could give away to Madara, who's a sensor, that he needs to be on guard, and that could ruin Obito's plans completely. We would be getting into the nitty-gritty to be able to really identify whether Madara would be able to react in time, like we would have to go over the specific scenario, but I think it's fair to conclude that if Obito waits for the perfect moment, he's going to secure the victory the majority of times this way. This means that Rinnegan Obito pushes Madara to his full power, which is a nice note to end on. Oh yeah, I forgot. This is Valley of the End Madara, who at his actual full power still wins. Kurama plays with the Bijutsu, while Madara repeats what he's done against Orange Mask Obito, as I've just covered. Akatsuki might need to do some hiring in order to push Madara to his fullest. Well, that wraps up today's video. Thanks everyone very much for watching, and catch you in another video. See ya!